Atelier Sophie 2 was almost here, so how did I prepare for that? Well, I played all 3 of the Mysterious games, the DX versions as well, the ones that give you all of the previous DLC and also some added content on top of them. Naturally, I've now finished them, and being the paragon of creativity that I am, I thought why not just bundle all 3 of the reviews into one video for your viewing pleasure. So with that, let us begin with the first game, Atelier Sophie, The Alchemist and the Mysterious Book. Atelier Sophie is what I consider to be a solid starting point for anyone interested in the Atelier games. It simultaneously demonstrates what the series is good at, which will hook in players looking for something different from the standard JRPG, but also what the series is generally more lacking in, which we're going to touch on very soon. As the title of the game suggests, you're joining the titular heroine Sophie as she looks to emulate the achievements of her late grandmother, by working as an alchemist who fulfills requests for the people of Kirkenbell. Soon after the game begins, she happens upon a mysterious book, a spunky one at that, called Placta, who becomes Sophie's sensei. And just like any perfectionist, she doesn't suffer any fools. Oh, must be related to the Christian Bale autobiography.
I want you off the f***ing set, you prick!
I believe this premise is what they call a novel concept. This double act of Sophie and Placta pretty much becomes the basis of the entire game, the core of the journey in Atelier Sophie. It's their interactions that ultimately push the plot along. So, what can actually be said about Sophie's story? Well, there isn't one. There's pretty much no plot here. What you're actually doing is following the journey of Sophie in her bid to become a better alchemist. It's more a coming of age than anything else, with disconnected events tying it all together as Placta regains her memories. Sophie attempts to conjure up some semblance of a story in the later stages, but it all feels contrived more than anything else. There's not really a flow or meaningful pacing there, and the final boss, or at least the one from the main game, just pops up out of nowhere with pretty much no build-up. So if you're looking for an intuitive narrative here, you're not going to get it. And normally, that would be enough to make me disregard a game completely. But with Atelier, that never happens, because it makes up for that shortcoming in so many other areas. For one, the characters. Just like in so many Gust games, this is a character-focused adventure. Sophie is able to travel around the various parts of the town, an admittedly drab town it has to be said, and talk to collections of people, a fair few of which will have individual stories that you can see through to the end. What's really great though is that because Sophie is the first game in a trilogy of titles, these interactions become the springboard for deeper stories further down the line. Returning members of the cast becomes a staple of the Mysterious Trilogy, and it gives you the incentive to see them all to their conclusion, knowing that it's likely to be followed in a future game. But even disregarding that, it's in your best interest to talk to the NPCs regardless, as some gameplay mechanics are locked behind these events. The ability to replicate items, which becomes very important in the latter stages, higher tiers of armor and weapons, higher level requests to earn the sweet monies, and even the option to invite members along into your party for your gathering excursions can only be found by talking to the characters themselves. So it becomes a key part of the structure of gameplay that you're experiencing. You're often going to ping around the city to see if there are new events in between your other activities. I will say though that Sophie does have a minor quality of life issue here, as there's no markings to illustrate where said events will occur, so instead of moving immediately to the events themselves, you're gonna be patrolling to find them instead, like a round of Where's Wally. Despite that though, it is a minor gripe and nothing more, simply because the town itself is small and it's not going to pad out your time. Of course though, this is not all you will be doing. In fact, it's a small part of the gameplay overall. Most of your time will be split between gathering and alchemy, and since you need the ingredients first before you can start concocting some sweet items, let's start off with the former. Sophie is able to leave Kirkenbell with a posse in tow and travel to any available node on an overmap. Entering a node puts you into a collection of small zones in many cases, and it's in these patches of land where you will gather components to take back with you to your atelier. It's on these travels as well where Sophie is able to unlock new recipes from exposure to the world, getting inspiration from gathering items or visiting certain landmarks, and though there are some small translation errors here and there in regards to how you unlock the recipes, an example being the puny missile which instructs you to get hit by the wrong move to unlock it, it works well. It's sequential and easy to follow, meaning that you can easily plan your excursions and what you wish to unlock. As for the zones themselves, again, they're nothing special in terms of presentation, but they work well here because everything is easily accessible over a small area. There's not much downtime moving from point to point, and you can just freely gather your items, which is important when you're going to be doing a lot of it. Yep, freely gathering with nary a care in the world.
Surprise, sucker!
Yeah, if you think you're getting away with ripping up Mother Nature in front of all this territorial fauna, no chance. You gotta fight for what you want in this world. The battle system in Sophie is fairly simple. It's turn-based with 4 characters on the front line, all of which can call upon unique skills. Actions are chosen in advance and the turn order is shown via a bar on the left side of the screen. The order at which a party member ends up on said bar is determined by stats like speed and the wait time specific to the ability they're using. Each character is also able to choose a stance before their action is decided, either defensive or offensive. Defensive allows the beefier characters to take hits for the fragile, while offensive allows you to rain down some more heavy-hitting blows. What's cool though is that the composition of the stances gives you a window into some unique moves by filling up the chain link gauge on the bottom left. For example, if you want to push for an offensive chain link, you'll need to make sure that a certain number of party members are in the offensive stance. In later stages, these links can progress to much higher levels, allowing for more potent team-based combos. And naturally, since this is an Atelier game, a lot of importance is put on the items you bring to battle, both usable items and the ones on your body. Sophie is able to craft and use all manner of items like bombs, healing remedies and buffing aromas, while other party members in comparison can only utilise a small selection of item types. So there's an emphasis on finding the correct balance in your team, as Sophie isn't able to carry the group by herself. Aspects like armor and weapons, on the other hand, are created in town, and you use materials specific to making each item, like ingots and cloth, as a base. This is also where traits come into play, as the base versions of these items are in many cases not going to see you through in the later stages or the higher difficulties. For example, putting defense up on a piece of armor will increase its defense stat, and what's cool is if you mix and match the traits in the correct way, you can unlock even stronger variants of those same traits. This in of itself is the core of success in Atelier Sophie, a lesson that was drilled into me many times during my early hours. Now, I put it mildly down to the game, as again it's a quality of life issue partly. You see, when you travel to a zone, you have no idea as to the strength of the enemies within it. Unique models for the beasties are minimal in this game, and the only way to distinguish the stronger from the weaker variants is to memorise the different skins. Well, I didn't manage to do that in many cases, and the only way I knew I was going to get my ass handed to me was when I heard this song, at which point it was too late. Again, it's a minor grievance because a game over in Atelier Sophie doesn't really amount to much. This isn't classic RuneScape levels of punishment. You lose a few of your gathered items and you get plonked back at the Atelier to go again. That being said, it is a bit annoying, and I wish there was some sort of indication before you go into a zone to tell you whether you have a chance or not. On the other hand, it was partly my fault as well, because I wasn't making my items in the way I should have been. I struggled at first to grasp the mix of traits that lends to the higher variance. And I do like that about Sophie. It's very much a game where you play by its rules, and sure enough, if you grasp the system on offer here, you can easily break it with some of the higher end traits and items, which is fine by me, because you actually have to work for that right. As for the method by which you will potentially attain godhood, it's achieved via the highlight of Sophie, its alchemy system. Synthesis itself is split into 4 parts: material selection, choosing a cauldron, placing the materials on a grid, and finally the traits transfer. Each item in your recipe book will have a certain affinity like water, fire, earth and wind, and gathered materials will also have similar affinities. To get the best results, you'll generally want to match these up. Making a fire-based item, use fire-based materials. Making water, use the blues. You get the idea. The components that you find in the field become the foundation of each effect on an item. For example, an ice bomb will have 3 separate effects, and the Hakure stone becomes the basis for the first effect, that being the bomb's damage. Each effect has a gauge assigned to it, and that is filled by a combination of the used component's value and how the components are placed on the grid. The higher the value, the more potent the effect. Once you've chosen your items, you then need to decide on a cauldron fit for the job, and many of these are found through your journeys in the world. These cauldron recipes in of themselves can even be remade by Sophie into better versions, like maintaining the same effects as the original but offering a larger grid to work with. And then finally, you need to take your items and place them on the grid itself. The general rule is to attempt to fill as much of the grid out as possible, but also to build up so-called bonus stars, capitalizing on them for larger effect values. When you finish the synthesis, the colour that is most represented in the cauldron gets a percentage boost to all of the matching effects, giving you the push you may need to unlock the higher versions. My words here alone don't do it justice, it's something you have to experience yourself. This alchemy system is simple to pick up, but very addicting to work with. It's not all about using the biggest and best items, it's about balance, placement, and there's just so many ways that you can combine materials to get the items that you desire. And this grid-based system in of itself becomes the cornerstone of the entire Mysterious Trilogy. This system carries over into both of its sequels and will be returning in Atelier Sophie 2. It certainly gets off to a strong start here. However, despite the praise I level at it, there is a problem with the alchemy, which in a way isn't even the game's fault. And I'm confident this is not going to affect many potential players who want to give it a go. The problem? I'm partially colourblind. No joke, I cannot tell the difference between this colour and this. They just look like the same shade of yellowish green to me. It's the same with snookerballs. If you laid a row of reds together and stuck a brown in there to be a prick, I couldn't tell the odd one out. And when colours are so damn important to the system on offer here, it really screws you over when you're trying to make those concoctions happen. The only way I could get around it was to use a reshade application and apply it directly to the game files itself, and even that didn't work all that well. In many cases I was just using the symbols of the elements themselves to distinguish between the two. Not a foolproof remedy, but it's all I could work with. And that's a shame because, like I say, I really enjoyed this system and appreciated the depth it offered. If Gust could have found a way to alleviate that problem, then no doubt I would have loved it even more. But really, issues like this that aren't even down to the game's mechanics do not detract from what is, at its core, a solid Atelier game. Atelier Sophie may look aged in certain areas owing to its original release in 2015, and it does lack the odd bit of polish here and there, but it's still what I consider to be both a great introductory game for newcomers and also a title that veterans can enjoy owing to the depth of the alchemy systems on offer. Whew, well that was deep. But we're not done, not by any means. We've actually got 2 more games to go over, so let's continue our trek through the trilogy with Atelier Firis, The Alchemist, and The Mysterious Journey. In this sequel, we are introduced to the feisty Firis, a girl who has been locked from the outside world as a citizen of Etona, though she yearns to one day get the chance. And because of this bordering negligence, Firis is a bit more rambunctious an individual. It's actually quite charming though. Firis ended up as my favourite of the mysterious protags, and she's got the balancing act of her older sister Liane to keep the tone neutral. I mean, she seems like a very responsible adult. Oh, it's a siscon. It's not long until Firis is given the opportunity to finally go outside, embarking on a journey to become a certified alchemist. In order to do that, she must travel the world on her way to Reisenberg, the game's capital city, and along the way gather up recommendations from other certified alchemists before she is qualified to take it herself. And this pretty much becomes your objective for the main story. Now, Firis is quite interesting in the approach it takes as compared to its predecessor. It was very clear that Gust didn't want Firis to be Sophie 2.0. Not that one. And as a result, they took quite a few liberties in this game, introducing a number of new additions to spice up the formula. And one of those choices reveals itself immediately as you enter the outside world. Gone are the small boxed-in areas from Sophie, and in its place is something more akin to an open world game. It's not truly open world, there are still zones that break it up, but the areas themselves have been multiplied in size 20 or 30 times over compared to Sophie. They are massive, and at first, I really liked the angle that Firis was going for. It fits the theme of the title, The Mysterious Journey. And some of the elements introduced in Atelier Firis have the open world and wide scope of choice at the forefront of their design. For example, the costumes you can buy for Firis throughout the world are going to give you actual benefits rather than simply being cosmetic. Some are going to assist your alchemy, others will allow you to move faster, and one costume somehow makes Firis a stronger negotiator and affords her discounts at stores. It's a really cool addition, and even though some are locked behind DLC or pre-order bonuses, a fair few are available in-game. I think the only thing I'm not too cool with is that the pre-order costumes and the DLC one are notably better in terms of their effects, like giving you a higher chance at finding rare materials, but even with that, I still liked it. And hopefully, Firis has a suit of armour stashed among those costumes as well, because it's not all about the journey, she's gonna have to fight to survive as well. Now, the battle system in Firis is mostly similar to Sophie. You get control of 4 characters in a turn-based system once again. However, the stances from the last game are gone, and in its place is something I like to call the meat shield maneuver. Because Firis herself is a bit, well, frail, she can implore others to take the hits for her, which in the early game is kind of needed. But other than that, it's mostly the same. Each character has a set of skills like before, and use of items become a cornerstone of combat once again. The only real difference arises in the so-called chain bursts. You fill a bar on the left-hand side through attacking an enemy, and once it reaches the max, you enter a chain burst state, and can link your attacks together. Your main goal in this instance is to attempt to push the linkage percentage to either 130% for a chain strike or 150% for a chain finish, which are basically just your super moves. Again, like Sophie, this is a solid turn-based system and not too dissimilar to what you would have seen in the previous game. It's still rooted in prior knowledge with a couple of adjustments here and there, hence there's not much more to say about it. So we won't. We're going to go back to the unique details of Firis, in particular its open world, and the reason I want to revisit that aspect is because it's not all sunshines and rainbows. I'm going to say this now. I liked Firis, otherwise I wouldn't have finished it. But I am going to be ripping into it a bit during my commentary. Though I appreciate the attempts at changes made in this game, I don't feel that they are conducive to an Atelier experience. So before you get angry and try to defend your cute little alchemist in the comments section, just know that I did like it. So when you think of an open world, what are the words that instantly pop into your mind? Exploration, possibility, mystery, wanderlust, words that are synonymous with time-intensive activity. You want to spend plenty of time to see what lies within those caves or down those hidden alcoves. Well, regrettably, Gust decided to throw a spanner in the works by reintroducing a concept from the past, a time limit. You have 365 in-game days to pass the Alchemist exam, lest you get the bad ending and confine Firis to eternal misery back in Atona. Oof, right in the feels. The thing is, time limits have existed in previous Atelier games. All the Arlen games had it, and even some of the Dusk games as well. The difference though is that they didn't have a landmass equal to the size of Middle-earth to traverse through. Exaggerated sure, but you get the idea. A time limit has no place in an open world game. It works in stark contrast to what an open world game is designed around. Yeah, sure, it can work in small instances, like a main story quest that needs to ramp up the urgency, but not for extended periods like this. In Firis' defense though, this time limit is not strict at all. It's the equivalent of expecting a Vindaloo curry in terms of spice and getting a Jalfrezi instead because they think you're too ignorant to know the difference. This time limit, though annoying in terms of the subconscious pressure it can put on you, gives you plenty of time to complete the exam. You can easily get all 5 recommendations on offer, do a fair bit of exploring, and still make your way to Reisenberg with plenty of time to spare. And when you finish the exam, the time limit disappears and you're free to do whatever you want. And that's something I will praise Firis for. There's a huge amount of content after you've completed the mainline story. Don't be fooled by the credits. That exam in of itself represents about 30% of what the game truly has to offer. And a fair chunk of the offerings after that point are good, like the character stories that return once again, the optional bosses, the new areas you can access, and of course the more advanced recipes. But then on the other side, there's what I like to refer to as filler content, mostly tied to the armada of inconsequential quests that you find throughout the world. Remember Two Worlds 2 and how that had quest numbers that rivaled an MMO? It's similar here, but the problem is that the quests themselves have negligible rewards like small amounts of coal, the game's currency, and a few idea points. Speaking of idea points, this was another addition for Firis. During her journeys, any sort of action within the world has the potential of giving Firis a new hint to pursue, and generally if you continue to perform the same actions you'll eventually unlock the recipe. On the other hand, if you're not feeling too patient, you can use your idea points to unlock it immediately for a set amount. However, the more I played through, the more I started to praise the high heavens that I am not a player who aims to 100% a game, because I'm telling you, Firis is a completionist's nightmare, and a fair reasoning for that is tied to this system. You see, because the actions you do in the world are the trigger for the hints, you have no idea what you have to do in order to get the hint in the first place. The recipes in of themselves are effectively hidden from you, and unless you have a paper list of every recipe within Firis and you're physically ticking them off as you go, you will have a hard time figuring out what you're missing. Take the Ori bomb for example. It's a mid-level bomb that is fairly important if you want to get the best result in the exam. Apparently, in order to get the hints for this, I had to make a bunch of bombs, mining bombs, and Frau bombs, which are just stronger variants of the original bomb, and also use them. So I did. I made 30 of each of them and used every single one. Nothing actually happened. At that point, I just gave up. I couldn't be bothered to do more synthesis for an item that probably would never even appear. I got the second best result in the exam and then just went on with my day. But for the sake of this video, let's say I did get the recipe for the Ori bomb, and now I just needed to make it. Okay, fine, let's go to the Atelier and synthesize us some destruction. As in Sophie, the bones of the alchemy system are solid in Firis. The grid-based layouts are back and there's still an importance on colours. Oh, kill me now. But this time around, instead of different cauldrons, you get catalysts, which will give your synthesis various benefits like extra effect levels if you match up the colours along a line or additional trait slots. Generally speaking though, each component has its own value that will fill this gauge on the right hand side, but there's an emphasis on filling the grid with similar colours in order to get the additional bonuses for those component values. For example, 3 blue placements on the grid will give you a 9% bonus on top of the value of subsequent components in the blue category, while 9 blue placements will give you an 81% boost, so it's all about stacking it up to get the higher level effects, and once again there's an emphasis on your choice of material and how you place them. The foundation of Firis' alchemy is good, it's still there. It's what comes after that which is the real problem. Since Firis is a rookie alchemist, especially at the start of her journey, it stands to reason that she blows and she's got to get better at it. Gust took that premise very literally. When Firis completes an item for the first time, it sucks, because you're not able to pass on traits or make larger quantities. To gain the ability to make the better versions of these items, Firis has to repeat a synthesis a lot, and slowly but surely her proficiency at making the item will go up, represented by these stars. Again, it's another case of a good idea on paper. Repetition of a task naturally lends to making you better at it, but it just doesn't work in an Atelier game. Take the bomb for example, one of the first recipes you get that requires easily obtainable materials. I counted, it took me 38 bombs to get to max proficiency. 38 synthesis for one common item. Now imagine doing that for every item on your list. Imagine doing that for the late game items where materials are much harder to come by. Let's say you finally unlock the recipe for a late game weapon, too bad, you need to make a collection of duds before you can get a crack at the best version. And what this means is that you'll be spending a lot more time in the open world trying to get materials to boost up your proficiency. And because of the increased volume of gathering, even the open world aspect starting to wane. You see, even though materials are plentiful, it's not like Sophie where they're concentrated in a relatively small area. They are abundant, yes, but there's a heck of a lot more land to traverse in order to get them, effectively padding out your time doing busy work. Additions like this detract from Firis' gameplay, and the one word that comes to mind when I think of alchemy in this game is grindy. It's a chore to do at times. Ah well, at least you can listen to banging music while you do it. The Firis DX version gives you the ability to listen to songs from other Atelier games, and there's a fair selection there. It even gave me the chance to listen to... And we're not done, because there is a notable egregious example of how grindy alchemy in Firis can be. It's an addition that only exists in this game, and it is one of the worst iterations of alchemy I've seen in the series thus far. It is called mass synthesis. Now, if this was a way of making bundles of raw materials that you could use for yourself to lighten the load for that proficiency grind, then great, bring it on. But no, it's nothing like that. It's actually a system whereby you take components en masse and pile them together into one large creation. Once again, good idea on paper, but not in execution. This is how I view mass synthesis. It's a boring run on a treadmill to reach a certain goal. There's no rhyme or reason to the items you put in, the only thing you have to aim for is making sure you fall within a certain quality parameter, which is piss easy. The rest of it is as simple as find 30 metal, find 30 fuel, find 30 lumber. And even though most of it was generally on hand, for items like metal I had to make a ridiculous amount of ingots to get the required amount I needed since it was so scarce at certain points. But hey, at least I got max proficiency for doing it. And what's so annoying about mass synthesis is that it's ultimately required. Though the recipes are rare, one of them is needed to advance the story, another is needed for the true ending, another gives you a pretty neat mechanic, not really needed per se, but it does open up some zones for some unique materials, and the last one I had was so important in terms of convenience that you pretty much needed that too if you wanted to save hours of gameplay. And that recipe needed a mass synthesis item within its own mass synthesis. So, I effectively had to do it 5 times, and after the first instance, every time I saw a mass synthesis, my heart sank. It felt like fragments of my essence had been sucked out, stirred into Firis' cauldron, exploded, served back to me on a blackened plate and siphoned down my gullet to make me whole again. No one can convince me that this system is good. There's no strategy there, there's no customization, the characteristics of an Atelier game that make its crafting so enjoyable in the first place are rendered moot. It just feels like a cheap, tacked-on addition for the sake of innovation, and I'm so happy I haven't seen it anywhere else. It's a shame really, because Firis has many good elements in it. It maintains the charm of Atelier with that carefree adventure, post-time limit. The characters, both new and returning, are great, plus it's got a strong lead in Firis herself. The music is excellent, the combat is solid, it's just the additions they made detracted from the core of what Atelier games are all about, and that's its crafting, the one truly unique aspect that sets it apart from every other JRPG on the market. As I said before, I did enjoy my time with Firis on her mysterious journey, but it is without question not only the weakest game in the trilogy, but the weakest Atelier game I have played so far. Yeah, well, I did say I was going to be ripping into this game during my commentary, but you know what? Like I say, I still liked it, and I appreciate that Gust had the balls to try something a little bit different. It just didn't work out completely. You know, I wish there was a game that just took the minor quality of life issues from Sophie and alleviated them, while also taking the good aspects from Firis like the catalysts. Well, as trilogies go, there is a third game to look at, and it is, in my mind, the best of the 3. It is Atelier Lydie and Suelle, The Alchemists, and the Mysterious Paintings. It's double the trouble in this final mysterious installment, as we join the twins Lydie and Suelle along with their goofy dad Roger as they attempt to make ends meet as an atelier of Merville. The premise once again is very simple in this game. They want to be the very best, like no one ever was. To pass exams is their real test, to make items is their cause. Now, despite the simplicity of the narrative once again in Lydie and Suelle, I actually consider this to be the best story of the three for two main reasons. First of all, it's actually got some emotional moments within it. Lydie and Suelle's story is notably family focused, leading to a more relatable journey as they attempt to become the best atelier in the city. Though in a bubble it's not the deepest story you're ever going to see, which is kind of a staple of the games in of itself, it does have some shining moments that took me aback. The only thing I see as a negative for this aspect is that it's quite easy to miss the true ending in this game. Unlike Firis, which also had multiple endings but only required you to clear particular character arcs at your own leisure, this game requires you to go through a fair number of hoops over the course of the entirety of Lydie and Suelle, like acing the periodic exams that you have to take to level up your atelier. If you botch it near the beginning and don't even realise you failed to meet the mark, then well, you're out of luck. It's actually what happened to me. I got the best result in every exam from chapter 3 onwards, but not in the ones before it. I didn't realise that you had to fill this bar to the top for it to count towards the true ending, and by the time I looked into it, it was too late. A small grievance there, but whatever. As for that second reason, it stems from continuity. Once again, characters will be returning, but since this is the final game of the three, it also acts as the conclusion of many character arcs, stories that have continued and expanded over the years. And really, that's more a merit of the Mysterious Trilogy in general, creating characters that you grow to care about, whether it's through their individual goals or just how genuinely appealing they are, and it's rewarding to see how their journeys have continued, but also how they end. While the game itself is strong in its own right as a standalone narrative, it also functions as a solid epilogue, and in typical Atelier fashion, many of the individual arcs end on a positive and uplifting note, fitting the theme of what these games are all about. But that's not to say the new characters are outshone, far from it. Lydie and Suelle perfectly complement each other as sort of a double act.
それに私、ナンパな男って好きじゃないし。確かにナンパだこれ。私もナンパな人は嫌いです。
いや、確かにナンパはよくするけど、じゃなくて、俺はただ君たちと話がしたいだけで。
お断り。ほら、ナンパ男は放っておいて食材買いに行くよ。そういうことなので、さようなら、ナンパのお兄さん。
The likes of Matthias and Lucia were distinct enough to be decent additions to the cast, and this guy Hagel just had me in stitches on several occasions. This scene does remind me as well, but can I just say how good the voice acting actually is in, like, all of the games? It's worth noting that I did use the Japanese voices, as that's how I begun with Atelier Ryza, and knowing the voice acting scene in Japan, it's to be expected that the performances were solid. Now, as for an English dub, there is one for Sophie and also one for Firis, though the voiced lines are far less frequent in that game. Lydie and Suelle, on the other hand, has no English dub, and it hasn't returned since. Now, that could be down to the relatively niche status of the Atelier series in the West, so Koei Tecmo don't believe it's worth it. It could be a method by which they narrow the disparity between Japanese and Western releases, or they could just be lazy. On top of that, I feel it is also worth noting that even though the quality of the voice acting is good, the sound balancing is a bit off at times, with voices sounding overly compressed, and there are some grammar issues that have slipped through the cracks here and there too, like this one. But in the majority, I'd still say it is good overall, and not overly intrusive to ruin an experience which I'm thankful for because Lydie and Suelle does so many things right. As said earlier, the game revolves mostly around raising the rank of the twins' atelier, and in order to do that, they must pass exams. Generally speaking, in order to even take the exam, they have to fulfill so-called ambitions, which normally involve creating a particular item, doing requests, visiting points on the map, or gathering materials, which once again you will be doing a lot of. But before we look at the gathering aspect, which is vastly improved here, I feel it's worth mentioning the worlds themselves. Evidently, Atelier games are not too strong in the graphics department, but I love the diversity in these zones illustrated mostly by the painted worlds. As the name of the game suggests, these mysterious paintings act as new areas where Lydie and Suelle can explore, with the potential of finding items that can't be found in the real world. It's pretty clear that the art team was just told to go wild and come up with whatever they could think of, and it results in some eye-catching zones. I really like that the nature of this game provided the scope by which the designers could go all out. And in the DX version, it even culminates in a brand new world that pays homage to another Atelier game outside of the Mysterious Trilogy, which is awesome. Even though I haven't played that particular game myself, I knew immediately who it was. Not to mention it provides you a new late game area to gather up those rare materials, because of course that's what we're all about here. As for gathering, that's been polished up to a beautiful sheen. The wide open spaces have mostly disappeared, you can repeatedly tap your action button to destroy rocks and trees, fishing makes a return, you can net bugs, and in typical fashion you can also take those gathering tools and improve them further by unlocking more advanced recipes. Unlocking recipes in of itself has also been fine-tuned. Gone is the frustration of Firis' hidden hellscape, and in its place comes a more ordered and structured progression similar to Sophie. Every chapter you'll get a new set of recipes to pursue, along with hints that are intuitive enough to understand. Plus there are story specific items and recipes that you can only unlock via buying or partaking in the optional events. So once again, there's an emphasis on exploring the city and talking to every notable NPC, and that is also much easier in this game because you actually have markers to show where you need to go. But once again, you're not getting these materials free. You want to make those biscuits? You're gonna have to bring out your fists and take out some names first. Or in this case, guns. Now, unlike the previous two games, Lydie and Suelle's battle system did see quite an overhaul in terms of design. The turn-based style is still there, but this time around you only get control of 3 characters on the front line. To make up for that, you also get a free member backline that can perform follow-up skills, abilities that only activate by fulfilling a condition. On top of that, as you progress character arcs even more in the latter stages of the story, you'll also unlock so-called combination art that have the potential of turning a battle completely. What this means is that you're encouraged to mix and match and find the pairs that work best together. These follow-up skills also add an additional layer of depth to your preparation because this game introduces traits specific to follow-up skills that can boost damage, inflict status effects, and more. And that depth for combat extends to the equipment you wear as well. It's similar to Sophie in that you bring raw materials like cloth and ingot to haggle the smithy for him to work his magic, but its effectiveness is determined by the traits already unlocked on the base materials themselves, which comes about from alchemy. But then on top of that, there are main and sub-core parts that you can attach to the base weapons, boosting their individual stats and also allowing you to transfer the beneficial traits. It's really cool, and it means that despite not making the armor and weapons yourself, you're still very much involved with the process. The systems in Lydie and Suelle complement the alchemy this time around. Now, it's all well and good having mechanics feed into the alchemy, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the alchemy itself is good. So, you know what? I can't remember, what did I actually write for this? There we go. Lydie and Suelle has the best alchemy system of all 3 games. Sounds about right, and here's why. Well, first of all, it removed one of the most annoying elements from Firis. The proficiency tied to individual items is now gone, a thing of the past lost in the deepest recesses of alchemic sludge. In its place, alchemy level now determines aspects like the amount of traits you can pass over to an item, which is a far better approach. You actually feel like you're getting meaningful progression every time you level up, so that's a good start. Now, as for the meat and bones of the alchemy, it's grid-based like before, and once again components are split based on colour, but this time around they aren't given individual component values, it's actually the size that determines its worth. Every effect for an item being made is shown on the right with a progression bar split into blips, and they're all colour coded. Placing an item on the grid with the same colour will fill in a blip, so if you take a component with 3 red squares, it will fill in 3 blips for all red denominated effects. However, if you place a red component in a red square on the grid, you get 2 blips for the price of 1. Simple enough. But this time around, the catalysts also make a return, and these special items are going to change up the methods by which you go about things. Catalysts have the potential to change the size of the grid itself and also bring in bonus squares, like increasing effect levels, unlocking more trait slots, or boosting specific effects. Each effect is not only color-coded, but also comes with a symbol attached to it. Saturn, Moon, Sun, male, female? That's a turn. These catalysts in some cases will have bonus squares for specific symbols. For example, fill in a +4 sun square with any components, and all sun-based effects get 4 extra blips. What these catalysts do is that they give you even more possibilities very early on. You can access the higher effects more easily, and as you get deeper into the game, the catalysts themselves will become more valuable, meaning that they too will become a focus of your progression. For example, the ruby is an excellent late game catalyst, and should you make one, it's in your best interest to load it with low cost traits like common item, low cost and low cost plus. You can then take that ruby, register it at a certain shop, and then just buy them for peanuts for all your future endeavours. It's brilliant, I love this because nothing feels wasted, everything has a use in Atelier Lydie Suelle, even if on the surface it seems useless. And then there's also the addition of enhancers. You can make and find certain items that you will affect the composition of a board completely, like filling inaccessible squares so you can work with them, or changing the colour of adjacent ones to another colour that allows you to access a higher tier of an effect. And thus there's more importance on how you place the components, placing them adjacent to each other so you can make use of these enhancers. It is a brilliant system. It has so much customization potential on offer early on, but adds even more the further you go in. It encourages you to think outside the box for your own convenience, and most importantly, it's fun. It's a fun and intricate system that doesn't lose its luster from minute one. This alchemy, in combination with the decent narrative, the enjoyable characters, the light-hearted atmosphere, the music, the world designs and stronger quality of life additions, overall combine to make Lydie Suelle the best the Mysterious Trilogy has to offer. And that rounds us out very nicely, I think. The Mysterious Trilogy, though it does have its odd shortcomings in the individual games, collectively is a joy to play through. And with such a strong foundation in these games, I'd like to think that Gust have everything they need to make Atelier Sophie 2 just as good. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some merchandise to buy. Yes.